Hello and welcome to the Genius Move Audio Academy podcast. My name is Paul Brewer. In this podcast, I'll chat to people who are professionally involved in the music business both here in Ireland and abroad. If you're listening to this, perhaps you have an interest in learning. Please visit geniusmove.ie, check my courses or book a one-to-one teaching session. Today's guest is Phil Hayes. Phil is currently on tour with Picture This, doing front of house as they continue the touring interrupted by the COVID pandemic. At the moment, they're on the last week of a 7-week tour around Europe. I should preface this by saying there are a few names thrown around within the podcast. These are Norman Verso, who was the house sound man in the Olympia, Deirdre Costello, who was the manager of Westland Studio, both in Dublin, and Roger Bakarian, who is an English record producer and manager. We agreed to chat over the net when Phil was in Stockholm in Sweden. I started by asking him about the tour.
We did a kind of UK and Ireland run, which was, obviously Ireland was 3 arenas, SSE in Belfast. UK was Hammersmith Apollo. And then over here, in Europe, it's been a double header with an English artist called Tom Gregory.
Right.
Who's had some headway in Germany. So it's kind of, he's headlining where he's a bit stronger, we're headlining where we're a bit stronger.
Oh, right, okay.
And there's been some small ones, 500-600s, and then there's been some 1200-1500s. So a bit of a mix from 400 up to 15,000.
Right, okay. So what are you carrying in terms of backline and stuff? Production, rather.
Yeah, I guess, backline starters, I guess, is reasonably stripped back from old school standards. It's a drum kit, and then all the guitars, bass, etc. is all on Kempers.
Ah, right.
So there's no amps at all. Everyone's on ears, no monitors on stage. So we're carrying a monitor desk, front of house desk, line system, multis, mics, everything. So we're completely self-contained. We need power and a PA. Yeah, it's essentially the same setup for 400 cap club as it is for a 15,000 cap arena.
Let's start where we always start, which is, how did you start in this?
Fluke.
Right, okay. Like most people, I guess.
Yeah, no particular musical background. I don't play any instruments. Was looking for something to do post-college. Didn't really know, to be honest. Had a clue. Looked around at a few courses. I went into a place called ATC, which was then in Harcourt Street. And they had an old Tascam desk, 3200, maybe 3700 desk. And I saw it and I went, no, that looks interesting.
And what age were you then?
Oh, I was 20, I suppose. I'd done a diploma in applied physics in Carlow RTC for 3 years after leaving school. I left school at 16, which is far too young.
To pass the time, or that was your mission?
I didn't really know what I wanted to do, and it was a do something, you know.
20 is quite old, actually, isn't it, to be getting involved in this messing?
It's quite old in that I wasn't straight from school, which was unusual. But then I was only 16 when I started college, so I was only a year older, maybe 2 years older than some of the guys, and I had already done 3 years in college. So
yeah.
So I'd kind of been out there. So in a way, I had quite a head start. Kind of having done the college experience, I'd had the head start in doing that. So I probably got a lot more from the course.
Yes.
Almost like a mature student.
Yeah.
You know, you see mature students coming through and they tend to pick up more because they're forgetting about all the other stuff, you know.
Yeah. Well, I think the thing about mature students as well is they ask questions.
No, exactly, yeah. And they ask questions that other people either are too embarrassed to or afraid to or are unsure, you know. Actually, I went back and did a degree in 2016 for numerous reasons, but, you know, I was obviously 25 years older than a lot of the students, and that really resonated then because I was asking questions that I knew they didn't know and I knew they wanted to ask, and it wasn't that, you know, I didn't care, I suppose. I knew the answer to the question had to be asked, so I didn't care who was asking it or what the answer was. So it's interesting, yeah.
What was the degree in?
It was IADT and Sound Training Centre. It was music production, something along those lines. I can't remember exactly the title of it. You know, it had its merits. Looking back now, I probably wouldn't do it again. But it was nothing to do with the course. It was me, you know. So what I expected to get from it, I didn't get from it. And what I probably should have done is I should have done a degree in something totally different, taken a diploma and whatever, 25 years experience, and not try to get a degree in what I'm already doing. I should have gone and gotten a degree in photography or,
Right. And why did you decide to do a degree?
At the time, I was teaching a little bit, and it was kind of becoming a thing that in order to teach, in order to get to the next level teaching, you had to have a degree or a master's. And STC were starting to do a degree and asked, would I be interested in doing it? And I said I would. I wanted to do it for that reason. I wanted to do it because I wanted to challenge myself a little bit, maybe learn something new.
Yeah.
And wanted a bit of paper, ultimately, Ironically, I haven't taught a single day since I did the degree, but that's just the way things work. So.
Yes, indeed. Now, did you find that when you were doing the degree, it introduced you to a load of ideas that perhaps you wouldn't have discovered otherwise?
I mean, it did and it didn't. It introduced me to stuff that I hadn't seen technically, and the way people work now is different than the way I probably would have worked. There's no consideration for the old school ways. It's all about Ableton and speed and getting things up and running really fast and getting results really quickly.
Right.
And that's probably not the way I would have worked. But no, honestly, I didn't get as much of that as I thought I would. I had hoped I would have gotten more. As I said, maybe I should have done something a bit more curveball and picked something completely different. Or a few years previously, I know you did the Masters. I was offered a spot on the Masters in Minute, and that was more synthesis, that kind of stuff, and it wasn't really my bag. But maybe I should have just gone ahead and done that,
So the idea of studying for studying's sake.
Yeah, and I guess that's what turned me off the Masters a little bit, is that I wasn't sure that area was something I was interested enough to give it that time. Do you know what I mean? I was afraid that I'd start it and go, now I'm just trying to get this done.
Yeah.
Rather than start it and go, I'm really into this.
Yeah.
So it was unfortunate. I don't know. Maybe I might go back and do something again.
Did you see yourself as a teacher, or were you going to, engineer or do both, or how did you see the future then?
I didn't see myself as a teacher at all, although quite a lot of my family are teachers. I have a couple of uncles who are teachers.
Okay. So it's in the blood.
So it's probably in the blood a little bit, but I didn't see myself as teaching at all. The year after I finished college in ATC, I can't remember exactly. I think there was 2 lecturers, both of them had left. They were a little bit stuck, and they asked would I come and help out a little bit with some of the evening classes. And I did that for a little while, just kind of doing practical stuff. And then I kind of by default fell into teaching a little bit. I did it quite a lot over the years. I did it full time for a few years then.
All right.
Doing other stuff on the side. And then even when I was doing, proper engineering work, I was still teaching a little bit. And yeah, taught quite a bit over years. Taught there in ATC, taught in the Centre Training Centre, taught a little bit in Pulse, and really enjoyed it, to be honest. Really enjoyed the challenge of it. Really enjoyed, weirdly, what you learn from being a teacher.
Yeah.
And you learn so much from whatever you know. You learn so much about what you know by explaining it to other people. It really reinforces what you know. And the amount of times I went during teaching I get that now myself,
The fact that you have to invent a sentence to explain this thing is a new process, as opposed to just having it buzzing around your head, yeah.
No, exactly. And it really does enforce the knowledge and the basic knowledge in your head, which is what you're trying to get across,
After that whole era, what happened then in terms of...
well, it was, there was kind of multiple eras, I suppose. At the same time in college, the first in ATC it was called, I met Martin Clancy, who went on to manage Jack L. And he kind of asked me would I be involved in a few things when he was straight after college. So I did Jack's first album. I did a bunch of stuff with Martin early on, and it was great, really good stepping stone into the industry. I really specifically remember the first day in the studio with Martin going, I learned more today than I did the whole year. And I learned so much in the college because I had a clue. I literally had no idea. I actually remember my first day in the college, we had to do a questionnaire. And the questionnaire was, have you been in a studio? And I was, no. do you play in a band? No. Do you play any musical instrument? No. Do you know the components of a drum kit? No. And I was sitting there taking this off going, wow, we're done. They're paying $3,000 or whatever. And everyone else is ticking and going on talking about their guitars and drums. And I was like, I have no clue what I'm doing. And weirdly, it's probably better because it was really open to whatever was coming at me. So it meant again then going on from college when I went into to do stuff with Martin, I was just soaking up what he was giving me because I didn't have a clue. I didn't know how he recorded. I didn't know how this worked. I thought you recorded all the components of the drum kit separately and then put them together. I didn't know that it was all
right,
together. I had no experience whatsoever. So from Martin, I learned so much because he's that kind of old school people producer kind of thing. Performance and getting the people happy. And as I said, I just learned so much from doing that. And then, everything from then was a stepping stone from there, to be honest. I started doing a little bit of live sound for Jack then. Again, I had absolutely no idea what I was doing. I remember my first ever gig, live sound, and we hadn't done any live sound in college. It wasn't done at the time. There was no college fair, I guess Ballyfermot maybe, but I remember my first ever gig was in the River Club, which was above Merchant's Arch. There used to be an Abbott Kebab there, and it was upstairs there. It was this little small club, held maybe, 70 or 80 people, completely glass. The whole way around was glass. It was a kind of a jazz drummer, a double bass, keyboards, and a guitar player. And I started miking up the drums, as you do, and it was as I thought you did. And the drummer was like, probably not going to need to mic the drums in here. All right, yeah, thanks. And then they went up to try and do something with the bass, and he's like, probably not going to need to do that with the bass in here. And I was like, all right. I was kind of looking around, I don't know what to do, so I put acoustic guitar and vocal into the PA, and that was it. And again, first day on the job, learned so much. Really had no idea, And then the second gig I did with them was the Olympia, which is kind of different shows. But again, a learning experience. I remember they had an old Langley in there, an old 401, and Norman was on front of house. And I remember EQ in the kick drum, and he was like, you probably don't want to do that. You probably want to take that out and I'll put that in. I was like, oh, thanks. That kind of, so green. But just that, starting out not having a clue, and going from there, just jumping in, to be honest.
The fact that he was only doing those sort of small gigs and stuff, was that an advantage insofar as you were developing together?
Yeah, but also in those days, in the mid-90s, it wasn't really that standard of either gig or act or engineer. There wasn't super engineers around who were just coming in and making this all fabulous. Do you know what I mean? It just wasn't like that then, especially at that level of act. He's only starting out, so the hope that you can hear his vocal is about as good as you can get,
Yeah, if you have the vocal and the kick drum, you have a gig.
Exactly, yeah. It's still the same, but, but obviously vastly different at the same time, that's where I started, and I ended up sharing a flat with Jack for a few years and did a couple of albums with him, and moved on from then, did some more projects with Martin. Contacts then built up over then, started doing other stuff. Mainly made most of my contacts through live work, and then that streamed into studio rather than the other way around. Because at the time there wasn't the studio jobs, There wasn't the gigs in studios particularly. There was West London Windmill, and that was kind of it. And I actually, during college, I'd been offered a job in Westland.
All right.
And they said, oh, come down for 2 weeks and then see how you go. And then you can be maybe the intern or, start doing a bit of tape up and whatever. And the day I was supposed to go down, I arrived and they wouldn't let me in because Fran Morrison had gone in and decided he didn't want anyone. And that was it. And my Westland experience complete. So.
Oh, poor you. And otherwise it was a great place. It was a great place to be as well, and Deirdre is a great woman as well.
Oh, I spent a lot of time. After that, I spent an awful lot of time. There was a period in the mid-2000s where I was in Westland for probably 2 years, through doing various different things. So, but so jumped around then between live and studio, depended on what was available work-wise, to be honest. Probably the same as yourself, playing some, you play some gigs, you do some studio stuff, you make ends meet, that's how it worked.
Would you say that was a sort of a typical path for an engineer, that you're doing live and studio at the same time?
No, not so much. It's not unusual that you would jump between them, but there probably isn't, and probably still isn't, that many engineers who do both to a reasonable level, to a high level, people tend to concentrate on it. And not for any other reason than you get kind of slightly pigeonholed in it, you know what I mean? You become a studio person who's afraid of live sound because it's very loud and feedback. And then you become a live person who's afraid of studio because it's too precise and, techie. But it's not any more techie or less techie than live these days anyway. They're so incredibly similar. Much more similar than people think.
Is that because of the digital desks and stuff like that, or is that
the technology and what you can do these days is so much closer. I mean, they're fundamentally still different in that the live thing, you do it when it's gone and everyone forgets about it. In the studio, they don't. That's the difference, really. From an engineering point of view, for me, the skills are the same. The gear is essentially the same. You bring a lot of stuff backwards and forwards. Back in the day, in a live gig, you were using a bunch of SM58s. You maybe had a condenser or two. That's what was different than the studio. How you were capturing stuff was different. It's not like that anymore. Quality of everything is so much better. I guess, which is probably maybe why I'm still okay to do lives. Trying to get vocals out of PAs, I'd be enjoying it as much anymore.
Obviously makes for a cleaner mix as well.
Yeah, you have so much more control. You can kind of do almost what you want. You know what I mean? I mean, there's still obviously compromises. There was always compromises, but you're in a far better position than you would have been back then.
Back in the day.
Again, obviously depending on the band.
Back in the bag of in.
The Dattlo was where I kind of got beaten up, I suppose. Spent a lot of time with a really bad PA in a really bad room with really bad bands and really bad gear. All of those things add up to quite a lot of learning,
Yes, indeed. Yeah. So I sort of became aware of you. Do you remember John Hanley introduced us? I was working for Audio Warehouse, I think, at the time.
Yeah.
And do you remember what they called Somebody Charles, that band you did an album with in
Kiss Charles, Dutch band.
Yeah. How did that sort of stuff fit in? What was going on around then?
I mean, I didn't fall out of studio stuff, but I stopped really doing studio stuff, partly because it wasn't there and that the bigger projects weren't there anymore. It just doesn't, it's not done like that anymore. You don't go and spend 3 months in a studio with a band. It just doesn't happen. So I guess it made it harder to make a living doing the studio stuff. So I started doing more live. So I wasn't doing as much studio stuff then. And it was actually, I'm trying to remember now. So it was actually Bell X1's manager who got that link at the time.
Is that Roger?
With this young Dutch band. No, I can't remember if it was Roger or post Roger. I don't think it was Roger. So Roger was an English manager, and then they had an American manager, Troy Johnson. And I know he did my deal on the album. Was it my production deal on the album for me? So I can't remember if it came from him or not. But they'd kind of half completed the album in Holland with a Dutch producer. He wasn't available, and they just wanted to finish some stuff off. They came over to Ireland for a couple of weeks. We had a lovely time, and a very nice bunch of kids. Kids is what they were. And then they went back to Holland, and then I mixed everything. I mixed the whole album then in where John was in Apollo. Yeah, they're unfortunately not a band anymore, but there's still the odd 3 cent tracks coming through.
I'm still social media friends with some of them anyway, so...
Yeah, no, me too. Yeah, no, I've met them a couple of times. If I'm in Amsterdam, I've got in touch with them. And actually, the singer now, she lives in London, so I've been in touch with her a little bit over the years. A lovely bunch,
I think I might try and do a podcast with her actually, because she's
oh great, yeah, no, she's great. She works for Goomba, I think, or she's a music sync.
Yes,
music
indeed.
sync now, so
that'd be interesting. Yeah,
it's kind of an interesting point because I was producing that, which was a change. It's not something that I've done particularly before being the producer. Obviously, as an engineer, it's part of your role to help make decisions, but to be the producer was not something I'd done before particularly, partly because I didn't consider that I was a producer, because I didn't consider I was probably musical enough. But it was a really interesting experience, helping people with arrangements, and lyrics, all that kind of stuff. It wasn't something I'd done. Had a lot of experience. I've been around it a lot, obviously. I've been around producers, so I'd learned a lot. I've done it a couple of times since, and it's not an area that I particularly enjoy.
The responsibility?
I guess it's not even responsibility. This kind of seems kind of silly, but I'm not sure I care enough I think you have to be more invested than I would have been. The fact that they say and or the, I don't really care, or how the music goes. I don't really care. So I suppose it kind of made me consider me, I suppose, So I'm a technical person. It's not that I'm not musical, but I'm not.
Yeah.
That's not my buzz, if you know what I mean. My job is technical. So when I try into the musical, my musical decisions that I would make with bands all the time would be technically led rather than musically led. I don't care what chord it is. I don't, it's not that I don't know. Obviously, I've been at this a long time. I know what's going on, but it doesn't bother me particularly. It's a B major or a C major or whatever it is, I can tell sonically and technically if it works or not. But I'm not going to get in an argument with you over music because I don't care. So, which seems kind of, it's not a negative thing, you know what I mean? It's not.
Like the way I look at it is, currently there's loads of lads engineering, producing, owning the studio, blah, 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 because that's the way the business has gone. But like in the old days, the technical job and the musical job were different jobs. And you just...
Different jobs, yeah, exactly.
Yeah, and you've just put your stamp down on the engineering direction, and that's cool.
I guess, yeah. I mean, as I said, I don't, if someone asks me a question, I'll answer the question. But, the question will be less sympathetic towards music and more towards the technical, Or, I mean, it's a funny one because it means, I'd often say that I'm not really a music fan, which seems a silly thing to say, but it's not. It's not that I'm not a music fan. It's I don't feel music in the same way that some people feel music because I don't play an instrument, which I see as a positive because it means I've no leanings. Do you know what I mean? I'm not dragged by any kind of particular music.
Does that mean that you can be brought onto a project with a band that has a particular view or a particular, approach, and they know that you won't be sticking your finger in, that sort of approach. So, they're only getting an engineer because that's all they want.
It's a really fine balance, though, isn't it? Because I think some of the engineering jobs are probably more like that than others. I think maybe front of house and maybe mixing is different because there is a creative bent to it. Maybe something like monitors is less so. It's even more technical. Or maybe something like a tape op or something is purely technical. You don't have to have. But for front of house, you have to have an appreciation of the music. You know what I mean? You have to appreciate what it is doing. So it's a bit simplistic to say that it's purely technical. Obviously, there's something in there. I remember sometimes you do kind of feel kind of negative and you're like, oh, the industry's killing me and I hate this music and I hate bands and I hate all this. And I remember going to record the Gloaming in the concert hall, the first time they played in the concert hall, and I was recording they were doing a piece for New Yorker magazine and I was going in to record it. I remember standing there going, yeah, it's back, there's a magic, and that's what it is, it's the magic, which you fall away from because you're in a technical job and despite you being in a technical job, So it is there. It's not that it's you're only technical and there's nothing else. But
I've never met Bell X1, but they do have a vibe that they know exactly what they want and they're very sensitive to their art, as it were. Would that be a reason, do you think, where you might have got the gig because you were not going to be in stamping on that? Do you know what I mean?
Yeah, I mean they're kind of a funny one because I've been with them for 20 years now, and I probably sampled over everything they do. In some ways, but in the live scenario anyway, I'm their biggest critic because I'm the one who's standing out there watching, and I know everything so well, I know all the tunes, I know all the music, I know them so well that I'm probably more critical of them because of that. But yeah, I guess. Ultimately, I don't get involved. I'm not telling them on chords to play or anything like that. I'm just making it sound as it sounds,
How did you get involved with them?
2003, it is 20 years ago. Mark Carlin, who does Front of House for Muse, was doing Front of House for them at the time, and he was going away with Muse and asked would I kind of take care of the gig for 6 months for him. And then he basically never came back from Muse, and I kept the gig. We did a bunch of tours. First day I worked with them, they were releasing an album, and maybe 4 or 5 months later, they were, would I be interested in giving them a go, you know? So went into Westland, actually. That was 2004 probably, and did some B-sides, and they went quite well. And then we did a single, and that went well. And then they were coming to do the next album, and they were kind of struggling, trying to get with the record company and management, trying to find what they were going to do, because they felt they knew what they wanted to do to a certain extent, and they didn't really want someone, as I said, coming in and stamping all over it. So we said we'd give it a go. We went into Westland, and yeah, we did a bunch of B-sides. We did a single, and then as they were coming up to the album, they were trying to figure out what they wanted to do. They had a couple of producers in mind. There was, scheduling problems and stuff, and they really wanted to go ahead and do the album. So they said, let's just go and do it. So we went into Westland and recorded the album, set up live, everyone played live, and then we obviously did some overdubs. But it came to mixing, and it was actually Roger, their manager at the time, was producing.
Who's on my list for a podcast in the near future.
Oh, yeah, Roger's awesome. He's brilliant. He had a lot of good stories too. Yeah, he had a really good, he had that kind of old school production thing as well, which is really fascinating to watch. And I think we were all really happy with what was coming out of Westland, rough mixes. So we thought we'd give it a go and we'd mix it, myself and Roger and the band. So we went to Eden Studios in London and spent a couple of weeks there.
That was the studio that Roger loves, isn't it?
That's the studio that Roger would have helped built with them. It's gone now, actually. It was sold.
Oh, right, okay.
But that was my first kind of bring me over as an engineer, to be an engineer in a studio and have 2 weeks to mix an album. It was such a pleasure, like fabulous experience. Incredibly big learning curve for me, just stepping up to that next level, several levels up to what I'd done, really, It's actually a very interesting or very funny story about it. It was the first time I'd had an assistant. I didn't even know what I knew what an assistant did, but I didn't need one, you know what I mean? I wasn't looking for an assistant. And I basically gathered every single piece of equipment they had, the 2 studios, and everything. They had APIs and, can't remember, Neves and everything. Too much so far that they ran out of patch leads because I just had stuff everywhere. And I just thought that's what you did. You know what I mean? It's not that I was ignorant, but I know I'd have to just use the best gear, and that's what you did. And I remember talking to the assistant, Dario, an Italian guy, who had to go and chart all the outboard and make sure everything was recallable. I remember saying to him, I said, this is great, all the outboard, and then we were chatting about who had been in recently. And I think it was Alan Moulder had been in doing the Killers. And I said, what did he have on his vocal chain? What did he have on the snare? And he was like, he just used the desk and a delay. I was like, all right, okay. So I didn't have to throw all this stuff at it, but so it was one of those learning days.
Yeah, that's it. You just have to be in a position to try that and then say, okay, well, there's no need for that. I'm
very lucky that Roger and the band trusted me enough to do that. You know what I mean? Like, they spent a lot of money mixing that album, making that album. It turned out to be their biggest album probably to date. But I was very green and unproven. It was great.
Cool. So the Picture Disc lads, Picture Disc. Mm-hmm. What is the relationship there?
So that was I was working previous to Picture Disc. I was working with Gavin James, and Gavin James is monitor engineer, Minnie Moore, who has been around all of the blocks. He did the script, he did the cores, and he was working with Gavin, and Gavin was looking for a front of house. So I started working with Gavin, and myself and Minnie got on really well. And then it came to Picture Disc were playing Electric Picnic, and Gavin was headlining the Saturday night, I think, and they were headlining the Sunday night, or vice versa, I can't remember. And Minnie asked if I was around, because Picture Disc's engineer at the time was stuck in America and wasn't able to get home. It was just proven ridiculously expensive and logistically difficult for him to get home.
Yeah.
So would I be interested in doing Picture Disc? So basically, I kind of cheated, and I used exactly the same setup for Gavin for both bands. And I kind of slotted picture this into Gavin's setup because I didn't have time. We had a couple hours of rehearsal in a warehouse the day before.
When you say slotting in what way?
I mean, essentially patching the kick drum to the kick drum channel, patching the snare drum to the snare drum channel, putting the vocals where the vocals were. And,
right.
You know, as a starting point, I didn't have anything else, and we didn't have time. I didn't have production rehearsals. We just had a quick rehearsal with the band.
And would there be a similar sort of track listing in terms of both bands, or?
Not really. And that Gavin was much more acoustic. He would have had amps. He would have had, you know.
Oh, right, okay.
Drums, bass, keys. Yeah, I mean, not that dissimilar, and all bands are more or less the same. So it's not exactly as if I put it in channel for channel, but just to give me a head start, you know. Yeah, to head on the main stage of the picnic, which is a bit scary. And then their engineer at the time just got stuck on a tour and couldn't do it, and then they asked me would I keep going. So that was 2018. So that's 5 years. I'm not sure I'll get to the 20 like Alex One, but we'll see.
Yes, indeed. I remember a couple of years ago or whatever, maybe last time we were chatting or whatever, you were saying that they were doing quite some smaller gigs in Europe and stuff like that. So has that sort of changed?
Yeah.
Or does it appear?
There's still small gigs in territories that where they haven't been before. There's still small gigs. They're signed to Sony in Germany now, so there's a kind of a bit of a push on Germany. So we're concentrating. We've done a lot of gigs in Germany this year, a lot of festivals in Germany this year. So, I mean, it's not obviously at the level it's at home, which is arenas, but we'll see what next year brings, I think, for them, you know. In fairness, they were very, very unlucky with COVID. They were really kind of on the crest of the wave. We just finished a month with the Jonas Brothers in Europe, you know, played to 500,000 people.
Wow.
You know, came back from that on like the 2nd of March or whatever, and album ready to go, everything ready to go, and then the world changed forever. So I think they lost quite a lot of momentum in Europe because of that. Kind of after COVID, they've been starting again. They're essentially a new band still in Europe. So
right.
Got some good crowds and the gigs are great. So
was that sort of a 2-year break, a time for them to decompress a little? You know, are they better off the second time around?
I don't know, to be honest. I think I'm not sure, because it's quite a kick in the teeth to go from playing to 500,000 people in a month to playing to no one for 2 years. You know what I mean? I'm not sure how.
Will it be the making of them?
Yeah, I mean, it's not going to do them any harm, is it? But they have a new album ready to go. The songs are great. They're really, really great live band. You know, they pull it off whether they're playing to 150 people or 15,000 or 27,000, you know, whatever. And they do the same gig. Ryan, the frontman, is great. Great singer, brilliant frontman, you know. So, and they're a nice bunch of lads. And what they do, which is great, is they trust us, myself and Minnie and Scott, who does backline. They trust us to do our job. But it's not like they get in our way or anything like that. But we're doing what we do. They're doing what they do, and we get what we need to do what we need to do, and they trust us. And that's ultimately what you need to do as an engineer, you know.
And that will make a 7-week tour more enjoyable, I guess.
Yeah, I mean, yeah. I mean, I wouldn't do it anymore if it wasn't enjoyable. To a certain extent, it's obviously, you know, touring is still very difficult. It's not great crack, you know. 7 weeks is a long time to be away.
Yeah.
But,
and any break at all?
We did the kind of middle week. So the third week was in Ireland. So we did 2 Belfast, 2 Killarney, and 2 Dublin. So I was home for 4 or 5 days around that.
All right.
But not more than a couple of days off. No. We had a couple of days off in Prague recently, but I mean, you're just catching up on sleep and emails and invoices, and you know.
Weren't we talking about doing the podcast on those dates that didn't materialise? So
yeah. I ended up spending most of that. One of the gigs, I left a piece of equipment. I left a screen behind in Vienna. I asked, and they were kindly sending it on to Prague, and I spent 2 days walking around Prague trying to find it because it had been delivered someplace, but nobody knew where to. And it was a public holiday, and you know, but that's what days off are for, and doing your laundry. You know.
Yeah, indeed, the old laundry stuff. Yeah. So, what's next?
What's next?
Or do you know? Or
I mean, there's still quite a lot of, I still have quite a lot of other stuff. Do you know what I mean? It's not like, I suppose, at the height of, say, a band like Bollocks One, 2009, 2010, that's all I did was them, because I was doing studio and live. So that was it. And picture this, and I guess bands in general don't tour the same anymore. There is obviously examples, but bands don't go for 2 years anymore, or they're not your full-time job anymore. So there's lots of other stuff going on. So, what's next? Yeah, I have a bunch of stuff before Christmas, little things. I'm doing a thing with Paul from Bollocks One. He does a lot of little solo things. They're great. It's just myself and him in a car. It's really good fun. We eat nice dinners and talk a lot. What else have I got going on? Yeah, picture this for next year is still a little bit up in the air. I think there's a lot of stuff in, but it's all TBC still. And we'll see. I mean, there's always a bit of a coming towards the end of the year, looking at January, February, going, I don't know what's going to happen, but it always works out.
Yeah.
If we can get through COVID, we can get through anything.
So that's Phil Hayes' way to do it. Many thanks to Phil for taking the time to chat. Please visit www.geniusmove.ie to find out about audio courses to suit you. Thanks for listening.